You call yourself a rancher? I have seen better cowboys pushing shopping carts." The sheriff's voice carried across the crowded livestock auction yard, drawing laughter from a handful of people standing near the cattle pens. Every conversation seemed to stop at once as dozens of eyes turned toward the tall black rancher holding a worn leather hat in one hand and a folder of livestock documents in the other. He did not answer immediately. He simply looked at the sheriff with calm brown eyes, then glanced toward the auction office where the registration deadline was only minutes away. Missing that deadline meant his prize cattle could not enter the state's largest sale of the season, costing months of work and opportunities that could not easily be replaced. The sheriff folded his arms with quiet confidence, convinced he had already figured the man out before hearing a single word. The rancher took one slow breath. "Morning, Sheriff. I am only here to register my herd." His voice stayed even, respectful, and controlled. Instead of stepping aside, the sheriff smiled wider. That paperwork better belong to somebody else. Several ranch hands exchanged uncertain looks. A few lowered their heads, unwilling to become involved. Others whispered to one another after noticing the expensive livestock trailers parked behind the rancher, though no one spoke loudly enough to interrupt the confrontation. The black rancher never raised his voice. He offered the registration folder with steady hands, allowing the sheriff every chance to read the official documents. Instead, the sheriff barely glanced at them before handing the folder back. "Nice try," he said. "Folks around here know the real ranch owners." More laughter spread through the crowd, though it sounded weaker this time. The rancher remained exactly where he stood. His shoulders stayed relaxed. His expression revealed neither embarrassment nor anger, only patience. Years of building fences under the summer sun, raising cattle through droughts, and negotiating livestock contracts had taught him something that could not be learned in a single afternoon. Losing control always cost more than keeping it. A young ranch hand quietly stepped closer, recognizing the man but hesitating to speak against the county sheriff in front of everyone. The silence grew heavier than the mocking voices. Behind them, auction employees continued directing trucks toward unloading areas while hundreds of cattle filled the air with restless calls. Time continued, moving whether anyone was ready or not. The sheriff checked his watch and took one deliberate step closer. "If you do not belong here, you should leave before you waste everybody's morning." The rancher looked toward the entrance where more trailers rolled into the fairgrounds, then back at the sheriff. "I belong exactly where my work brought me." His answer contained no challenge, only quiet certainty. That unexpected confidence caused several people in the crowd to exchange puzzled glances. It was not the response they had expected from someone being publicly humiliated. Still, the sheriff interpreted the composure as stubbornness instead of dignity. He believed he was protecting local tradition, unaware that every passing second was carrying him closer to a mistake that the entire county would soon remember. The sheriff let the silence linger as though he expected it to force the rancher into backing away. Instead, the black rancher stood quietly with the same steady posture, neither challenging nor retreating. He held his registration folder against his side and watched another livestock trailer roll through the fairgrounds behind the security gate. Every minute that passed brought the auction closer to closing its registration window, yet he refused to let urgency control his emotions. "You still have not answered my question," the sheriff said. "Who do you work for?" The rancher answered without hesitation. "I work for my family ranch." The sheriff gave a short laugh that encouraged a few others to smile along with him. "That is interesting. I know just about every ranch owner in this county." The rancher nodded politely. "Then perhaps today is the day we meet." His calm reply caught several people by surprise. There was no sarcasm hiding behind his words. He spoke with the confidence of a man who had nothing to prove because years of honest work had already done that for him. A woman carrying auction paperwork quietly slowed her pace as she walked past them. She glanced from the sheriff to the rancher before continuing toward the office without saying anything. Two teenage ranch hands standing beside a livestock scale exchanged uncertain looks. One of them whispered, "I think I have seen him before." The other shrugged, unwilling to speak loudly enough for anyone else to hear. The sheriff noticed the growing attention and straightened his shoulders. Public authority had always come naturally to him. He believed confidence alone could settle almost any disagreement. "Listen," he said, pointing toward the parking area. "People cannot just drive expensive trailers onto these grounds and pretend they belong here. The rancher followed the direction of the sheriff's hand. 3 polished livestock trailers stood neatly parked behind a heavy-duty pickup truck carrying the name of a ranch painted across the doors. Dust still rested along the lower panels from hundreds of highway miles traveled before sunrise. "Those trailers are mine," the rancher replied. "The cattle inside them have been on the road since 4 o'clock this morning." The sheriff shook his head slowly. "Anybody can make a claim." The rancher reached into the folder again, removing several official health certificates, transportation permits, and auction registration forms, each carefully organized inside protective sleeves. "Every document is signed," he said. "You are welcome to verify any of them." Rather than examining the paperwork, the sheriff folded his arms once more. "Paper can say almost anything." Those words settled heavily over the crowd. A few people who had laughed earlier now remained silent. Something about the rancher's patience made the sheriff's confidence appear less certain than before. The rancher looked briefly toward the auction office where employees continued checking in ranchers one after another. He knew exactly how much time remained before registration would close. Missing the deadline would mean transporting dozens of cattle hundreds of miles back home without making a single sale that day. Months of planning, fuel costs, feed expenses, veterinary inspections, and breeding investments rested on the next few minutes. Even so, he refused to argue. "Sheriff," he said calmly, "I respect your responsibility to keep order. I only ask that you verify the facts before making a decision." His words carried no bitterness. They sounded like advice offered with quiet sincerity. That only seemed to frustrate the sheriff even more. He had expected excuses, complaints, perhaps even anger. Instead, he faced a man who remained respectful despite standing in front of dozens of strangers who had already begun forming opinions. Unknown to nearly everyone gathered there, several longtime cattle buyers had just arrived from another section of the fairgrounds. As they walked toward the auction office, one of them glanced across the crowd. His expression changed the moment he recognized the black rancher standing beside the sheriff, and without saying a word, he slowed his steps, watching carefully as the uncomfortable scene continued to unfold. The cattle buyer who had paused near the edge of the crowd narrowed his eyes, studying the quiet rancher for another moment before turning toward the auction office. He did not interrupt. Not yet. Instead, he watched with growing disbelief as the conversation continued. Around him, more trucks pulled into the fairgrounds, their diesel engines echoing across the gravel parking lot, while ranchers unloaded livestock for one of the largest sales of the year. Every passing minute meant another registration completed, another opportunity slipping away for the man still standing outside the gate. The sheriff remained convinced he was protecting the event. "You keep talking about respect," he said. "Respect starts with honesty." The rancher answered in the same calm tone that had frustrated the sheriff from the beginning. "Honesty is exactly why I have stayed instead of leaving." Several people exchanged uncertain glances. The laughter from earlier had disappeared completely. It had been replaced by curiosity. Nobody could understand why someone facing public embarrassment remained so composed. One older rancher leaned quietly toward his friend and whispered, "If he was making this up, he would have walked away by now." His friend nodded without taking his eyes off the scene. The sheriff noticed more people gathering nearby and seemed determined not to lose control of the situation. "Open one of those trailers," he said. "Let us see what you actually brought." The rancher looked toward the parked trailers and then back at the sheriff. "I will gladly do that after my cattle are officially checked in. The animals have already traveled several hundred miles. I would rather not delay them any longer than necessary." The answer sounded practical rather than defensive, but the sheriff interpreted it differently. "Convenient excuse," he replied. The rancher simply folded the registration folder closed. "No, sir. It is standard livestock handling." His voice remained steady enough that even the nearby auction employees began paying closer attention. One clerk quietly checked the wall clock inside the registration office before stepping back outside. Registration would close in less than 15 minutes. She hesitated, clearly recognizing that something unusual was happening, but she also knew the sheriff carried authority within the county. Challenging him publicly was not a decision anyone made lightly. Near the livestock pens, a ranch foreman walked toward the trailers carrying feed buckets. As he passed, he glanced at the rancher's pickup truck. His expression changed instantly. He slowed his pace, looked again at the ranch logo painted across the driver's door, then looked back toward the black rancher. Recognition flashed across his face, but instead of speaking immediately, he quietly stepped aside and reached for his phone. The sheriff continued speaking, unaware of the subtle changes unfolding around him. "You expect everyone here to believe you own equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars." The rancher answered without hesitation. "I do not expect anyone to believe me without facts." That sentence lingered over the crowd. A young woman helping unload livestock lowered her clipboard and looked directly at the rancher. Another buyer quietly walked closer, pretending to study the cattle pens while listening to every word. The atmosphere no longer resembled public amusement. It had become something else entirely. People were beginning to question whether they had witnessed the whole story. The sheriff still stood firmly between the rancher and the registration office, convinced that confidence alone would settle the matter. Yet confidence could not erase details that others were beginning to notice. The polished trailers carried matching registration numbers. The truck displayed a licensed commercial livestock transport permit. Fresh veterinary inspection stickers were attached exactly where state regulations required them. None of those details fit the image the sheriff had already decided to believe. The rancher never pointed them out. He simply waited. Across the lot, the cattle buyer who had recognized him finally reached the auction office. After a brief conversation with an employee behind the registration desk, both of them turned toward the entrance at nearly the same moment. The employee's eyes widened as she looked through the glass doors toward the growing crowd outside. Without saying another word, she picked up a binder from the counter and hurried toward the entrance while the cattle buyer followed only a few steps behind. Neither the sheriff nor most of the people watching had any idea that the quiet certainty of the man standing before them was about to make perfect sense. The registration office door opened, and an auction coordinator hurried across the gravel with a thick binder tucked under one arm. Beside her walked the cattle buyer who had quietly left the crowd only moments earlier. Neither of them spoke as they approached. The people standing nearby instinctively stepped aside, sensing that something important was about to happen. The sheriff remained in place, confident that the arrival of auction officials would support his decision. The black rancher simply turned toward them with the same calm expression he had carried since the beginning. The coordinator stopped a few feet away and looked directly at him. "Good morning, sir," she said politely. "I believe we have been expecting your livestock shipment." Before the rancher could answer, the sheriff interrupted. "You might want to double-check that. He claims these trailers belong to him." The coordinator blinked in surprise, then opened the binder without responding immediately. She carefully turned several pages before finding the registration packet she was looking for. The official forms listed the ranch name, transportation permits, veterinary certificates, and livestock identification numbers that matched the decals displayed on the parked trailers. She compared the paperwork in the binder with the documents still resting inside the rancher's folder. Every number matched perfectly. The cattle buyer quietly nodded to himself. "That is exactly what I expected," he said. Several people standing nearby leaned closer, trying to see the paperwork without appearing rude. The sheriff crossed his arms again. "Paperwork can still be wrong." The coordinator looked up calmly. These records were verified before sunrise when the shipment entered the state. They were also confirmed during pre-registration yesterday afternoon. A low murmur spread through the crowd. The sheriff hesitated for the first time. The rancher did not smile. He did not react with satisfaction. He simply stood quietly while allowing the facts to speak for themselves. One elderly ranch owner slowly removed his hat as he studied the black rancher with new respect. "I thought I recognized those cattle trailers," he admitted softly to the man beside him. "They have won awards at more than one state competition." More whispers followed. People who had arrived only minutes earlier began asking one another who the rancher actually was. The answer moved quietly from person to person, spreading faster than any announcement could have. The rancher's family operation had earned a reputation across several states for producing some of the highest quality breeding stock in the region. His livestock regularly appeared at major agricultural events, though he himself preferred staying away from publicity. The sheriff looked toward the trailers once again. Details that had seemed unimportant earlier suddenly became impossible to ignore. The professionally maintained equipment, the commercial transport permits, the inspection stickers, and the carefully organized paperwork all pointed toward the same conclusion. Yet pride made it difficult for him to admit that his first impression had been incomplete. "If everything is in order," the rancher said respectfully, "I would appreciate finishing registration before the deadline." There was no accusation in his voice, no attempt to embarrass anyone, only a simple request to continue with the work he had traveled hundreds of miles to complete. The coordinator immediately nodded. "Of course, sir. We can finish everything inside the office." Before either of them could take another step, a ranch employee came running from the direction of the livestock barns, breathing hard after crossing the fairgrounds. "We have a serious problem," he called out. "One of the temporary holding fences near the north pens has started giving way. Several valuable cattle are becoming restless, and we need experienced ranchers immediately before registration even finishes." The crowd instantly turned toward the barns. Concern replaced curiosity. The auction coordinator looked toward the sheriff, then toward the black rancher. The cattle buyer spoke first. "If anyone here knows how to settle nervous livestock without creating a bigger problem, it is him." For the first time that morning, every pair of eyes shifted toward the rancher for guidance instead of judgment, while the sheriff stood silently beside him, realizing that the next few minutes would reveal far more than ownership papers ever could. Without wasting another second, the black rancher handed his registration folder back to the auction coordinator and turned toward the north holding pens. "Please keep my place in line," he said calmly. "I will finish the paperwork as soon as the cattle are safe." The coordinator nodded immediately. "We will take care of it." The sheriff watched in silence as the rancher walked across the gravel without rushing. There was purpose in every step, but never panic. Several ranch hands hurried after him, while the cattle buyer motioned for others to help clear a path. By the time they reached the north pens, the problem had become obvious. One section of temporary steel fencing had shifted after a support post settled unevenly into the ground. The barrier had not collapsed, but it leaned enough to make the cattle uneasy. Several prize breeding bulls were pacing in circles, reacting to the unfamiliar movement and the growing crowd surrounding them. Auction workers stood several yards away, uncertain how to approach without increasing the animal's stress. The rancher stopped before entering the pen and quietly observed the entire scene. He did not speak for several seconds. Instead, his eyes moved from the leaning fence to the spacing between the animals, then toward the nearby feed trailer and the position of the open loading gate. "Nobody run," he said in a calm voice that carried across the pen. "Keep talking softly. Give them room to settle." His words immediately slowed the nervous energy surrounding the enclosure. The workers instinctively lowered their voices. Even those who had never met him found themselves following his instructions without hesitation. The sheriff remained a short distance behind, watching carefully. He expected complicated commands or dramatic action. Instead, the rancher simply asked one employee to bring fresh hay, another to secure several additional support posts, and two experienced handlers to stand quietly near opposite corners of the fence without making sudden movements. "Do not pressure them," he said. "Let them decide where they feel safe." Within moments, the restless movement inside the pen began to slow. The cattle lifted their heads toward the fresh hay, shifting their attention away from the leaning fence. The rancher stepped forward only after their breathing had visibly settled. He rested one hand gently against the nearest gate while studying the weakest support post. "We can reinforce this without moving the herd," he explained. "If we rush them now, we create a bigger problem than the fence itself." The maintenance crew quickly positioned heavy wooden braces exactly where he indicated. Working carefully, they stabilized the damaged section while the rancher continued speaking in the same even tone, never raising his voice. The cattle gradually relaxed, returning to quiet feeding as though the tension had never existed. A wave of relief spread across the workers. One young ranch hand quietly shook his head in amazement. "I thought we were going to lose control of the whole pen," he admitted. The cattle buyer smiled faintly. "Experience always looks calm." The sheriff said nothing. He had spent years responding to emergencies, yet he recognized something different unfolding before him. Authority had not solved the problem. Patience had. Knowledge had. Quiet confidence had. The rancher stepped back after inspecting the repaired fence one final time. "Check every support post before unloading the next trailers," he advised. "The ground is softer on this side than it appears." The foreman immediately wrote down the recommendation. "We will do that." More ranchers who had witnessed the scene began introducing themselves to the black rancher. thanking him for stepping in before the situation became more complicated. Some admitted they had not realized who he was when they first saw him outside the registration office. Others simply expressed appreciation for the way he had handled everything without anger despite the public embarrassment he had experienced only minutes earlier. Throughout every conversation, the rancher remained humble. He accepted each handshake with a warm smile, but never mentioned the sheriff or the earlier confrontation. As the crowd slowly dispersed and the fairgrounds returned to their normal rhythm, the sheriff remained standing beside the now secure fence, watching the man he had judged too quickly walk back toward the registration office. For the first time that morning, the weight of his own assumptions felt far heavier than the badge resting on his chest. The walk back toward the registration office felt completely different from only a few minutes earlier. The same gravel road stretched beneath the rancher's boots, the same livestock trailers lined the fairgrounds, and the same crowd remained gathered around the auction grounds. Yet the conversations had changed. Instead of whispers filled with doubt, people now greeted him with respectful nods. Ranch owners stepped aside to clear a path without being asked. Auction workers smiled as he approached the office, and several cattle buyers quietly thanked him for preventing a difficult situation from becoming much worse. The rancher acknowledged every greeting with the same humble smile, never allowing the attention to linger on himself. His focus remained on completing the work he had traveled hundreds of miles to accomplish. Inside the registration office, the auction coordinator already had his paperwork organized on the counter. "Everything is ready for your signature," she said warmly. "Your registration window has been held open." The rancher removed his hat, thanked her sincerely, and reviewed each page before signing where required. Every document had already been verified through state livestock records, transportation permits, health inspections, and ownership certificates. There was never any question about who he was. There never had been. The only thing missing earlier had been the willingness to look at the facts before reaching a conclusion. As the coordinator handed him his completed registration packet, the cattle buyer who had recognized him earlier extended his hand. "I have attended livestock sales across 5 states," he said. "You handled today better than most people twice our age would have." The rancher accepted the handshake with quiet gratitude. "My father always said that arguments rarely change minds. Actions sometimes do." The simple sentence lingered in the room. Several employees exchanged thoughtful glances. None of them had forgotten what had happened outside. They also noticed that not once had the rancher complained or demanded an apology. Instead, he had solved a problem that benefited everyone attending the auction. Outside the office windows, the sheriff remained standing near the entrance, watching the steady flow of ranchers checking in for the sale. His confident posture from earlier had disappeared. He replayed every moment in his mind. The expensive trailers, the organized paperwork, the calm responses, the recommendation that stabilized the damaged holding fence before anyone else knew what to do. Each memory made his earlier assumptions harder to defend. One of his deputies approached quietly. "Sheriff," he said in a careful voice, "the fairgrounds manager wanted me to let you know that the rancher you stopped has supplied breeding stock for county youth agriculture programs several times over the past few years." I checked after hearing people talk. The sheriff looked toward the registration office without answering. The deputy continued, "Several families around here bought cattle from his ranch. They speak very highly of him." The sheriff slowly nodded, but the information brought little comfort. Respect built over decades had almost been dismissed within a few careless minutes simply because he believed appearance told the whole story. A short time later, the rancher stepped back outside carrying his completed registration packet. The sunlight reflected across the polished livestock trailers waiting to unload. Ranch hands began opening the rear gates while auction inspectors prepared to examine the animals. Everything was finally moving according to schedule. The rancher noticed the sheriff standing alone near the walkway. Their eyes met briefly across the open space. There was no anger in the rancher's expression, no satisfaction, no silent attempt to embarrass the man who had embarrassed him. He simply gave a polite nod before continuing toward his crew. That small gesture unsettled the sheriff more than any harsh words could have. It reminded him that dignity did not require revenge. It only required consistency. As more people gathered around the impressive cattle entering the fairgrounds, conversations shifted away from the confrontation and toward the remarkable quality of the livestock themselves. Buyers discussed bloodlines, breeding records, and championship awards earned over many years. With every new conversation, the sheriff discovered another piece of the rancher's reputation that had existed long before they met that morning. The realization settled heavily in his thoughts. He had not merely underestimated a stranger. He had publicly judged one of the most respected ranchers at the entire event before allowing the truth an opportunity to speak. The auction grounds settled into their familiar rhythm as buyers moved from pin to pin, studying bloodlines, checking registration records, and discussing bids that would shape the rest of the season. The black rancher walked beside his crew, answering questions with quiet confidence while helping unload the final group of cattle. Every movement reflected years of experience. He noticed a nervous young ranch hand struggling to guide a heifer through the inspection lane and stepped forward without hesitation. "Slow down," he said with an encouraging smile. "She is watching your hands more than your voice." The young man relaxed his shoulders and followed the advice. Within seconds, the animal settled and walked calmly into position. "Thank you, sir," the young ranch hand said with visible relief. "I thought I was doing everything wrong." The rancher smiled gently. Every experienced rancher was once new. The animals teach patience if we are willing to learn. Several people standing nearby overheard the conversation. They exchanged appreciative smiles, recognizing that the same patience shown toward livestock was the patience he had shown earlier toward people. News of what had happened at the entrance had quietly spread throughout the fairgrounds, but the story now carried a different tone. No one talked about embarrassment anymore. Instead, they talked about the way the rancher had responded. Buyers praised his professionalism. Auction employees admired his restraint. Experienced ranch owners spoke about the reputation he had built through decades of honest work instead of loud promises. More than once, someone mentioned that he had every reason to become angry, but never allowed frustration to control his character. The sheriff heard those conversations while making his routine walk across the grounds. Every compliment directed toward the rancher reminded him that respect had been earned long before that morning. It had been visible to nearly everyone except the one person who believed he already knew enough. As he approached one of the livestock barns, he noticed a small group of local high school agriculture students gathered around the rancher. They listened carefully while he explained how careful breeding decisions affected the health and temperament of future generations of cattle. He answered every question with patience, never speaking down to anyone regardless of age or experience. One student finally asked, "How do you stay so calm when things do not go your way?" The rancher paused for a moment before answering. "Because every difficult day gives someone the opportunity to learn something. I cannot choose what happens around me, but I can choose the example I leave behind." The students nodded thoughtfully. Several adults standing nearby quietly did the same. The sheriff remained several yards away, hearing every word without interrupting. He remembered the confidence with which he had judged the rancher only hours earlier. That confidence now felt painfully misplaced. The fairgrounds manager approached the sheriff with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. "I wanted you to know something," she said quietly. "The County Youth Livestock Scholarship that started 5 years ago would not exist without that rancher. He has donated breeding stock, equipment, and countless hours teaching young people. Many families here owe part of their success to his generosity." The sheriff looked toward the students gathered around the rancher. Their expressions reflected admiration rather than obligation. Respect like that could never be demanded. It could only be earned over time. The manager continued, "He has never asked for recognition. Most people outside the agriculture community do not even realize how much he has contributed." The sheriff slowly lowered his eyes. The realization became impossible to ignore. Earlier that morning, he had publicly questioned whether the rancher belonged there. Now he understood that the man belonged there long before many of the people attending the auction, including himself. The rancher finished answering the students' questions and returned to helping his crew prepare the cattle for judging. He never looked toward the sheriff, never sought acknowledgement, and never mentioned the confrontation that had delayed his morning. His attention remained exactly where it had always been, on his work, his team, and the people around him. Watching that quiet consistency, the sheriff finally understood that true leadership was not measured by the authority someone carried on a badge or a title. It was measured by the steady character that remained unchanged whether others offered respect or withheld it. By late afternoon, the judging rings had become the center of attention. Families filled the grandstands, buyers gathered along the fences with notebooks in hand, and local reporters quietly interviewed exhibitors about the strongest cattle in the competition. The black rancher stood beside his finest breeding bull, gently brushing dust from the animal's shoulder while speaking softly to keep it relaxed before entering the ring. His crew moved with practiced confidence, checking halters, reviewing paperwork, and making certain every detail reflected the same care that had shaped the ranch for years. There was no sign that the difficult morning had distracted anyone from their purpose. Across the fairgrounds, however, the sheriff could not escape the memory of his own words. Every friendly greeting directed toward the rancher seemed to echo louder than the laughter that had surrounded the confrontation earlier that day. He noticed respected ranch owners stopping to shake the rancher's hand. Children smiled as they waved to him. Auction officials thanked him again for helping stabilize the holding pens. The sheriff slowly realized that every conversation revealed another chapter of a reputation he had never taken the time to understand. The County Fair Board chairman approached the microphone near the main judging arena to welcome visitors before the afternoon events. During his remarks, he paused unexpectedly. "Before we begin," he said, "I would like to recognize one of today's exhibitors whose commitment to agriculture has strengthened ranching families across our region for many years." The crowd applauded politely as the chairman continued. "Many of our youth scholarship recipients, beginning ranchers, and livestock education programs have benefited from his generosity, mentorship, and willingness to help others succeed." The chairman then invited the black rancher to step forward for a brief acknowledgement. A ripple of surprise moved through the audience, followed almost immediately by warm applause that grew stronger with every passing second. The rancher looked genuinely uncomfortable with the attention. He quietly thanked his crew before walking toward the platform. Accepting the small commemorative plaque with both hands, he smiled modestly. "I appreciate this," he said, "but every young person willing to work hard deserves encouragement. Agriculture has always been strongest when neighbors help one another." His words were simple. They contained no references to awards, business success, or personal sacrifice. Instead, he redirected the recognition toward the community itself. The applause grew even louder. Standing near the back of the gathering, the sheriff lowered his eyes. He remembered asking whether the rancher belonged there. Now he was watching an entire county publicly celebrate a man whose influence reached far beyond livestock sales. The contrast was impossible to ignore. A deputy standing beside him spoke quietly. "Sheriff, I did not know he helped so many families." The sheriff answered honestly, "Neither did I." There was no attempt to defend his earlier actions, only quiet regret. When the ceremony ended, the rancher stepped down from the platform and immediately returned the plaque to one of his crew members so both of his hands would remain free to help prepare the cattle for judging. The gesture reflected the same humility people had been describing throughout the afternoon. He never lingered to enjoy the attention. He simply resumed working beside everyone else. The sheriff watched him for another long moment before taking a slow breath. He finally understood that an apology could not erase what had happened, but avoiding one would only deepen the mistake. Removing his hat, he walked steadily across the fairgrounds toward the livestock barns. Several people noticed where he was heading and quietly stepped aside, sensing that another important moment was about to unfold. The rancher looked up from adjusting a gate latch as the sheriff approached. Their eyes met once again, but this time there was no crowd laughing, no raised voices, and no misunderstanding standing between them. There was only a quiet space where one man had finally become ready to speak after allowing the truth to replace his assumptions. The sheriff stopped a few feet away and removed his hat before saying a single word. Around them, the sounds of the fairgrounds continued as they always had. Buyers discussed upcoming bids, ranch hands prepared livestock for the evening events, and families wandered between the barns, unaware that one of the most important conversations of the day was about to begin. The black rancher finished securing the gate latch before turning to face him. Neither man spoke for a moment. Finally, the sheriff broke the silence. "I owe you an apology." His voice was quieter than it had been that morning, stripped of the certainty that had once filled every sentence. "I judged you before I knew who you were. I questioned your place here without taking the time to learn the truth. That was my mistake, and I am sorry." The rancher studied him calmly. There was no satisfaction in his expression, only quiet attention. The sheriff continued, I wear this badge because people trust me to make fair decisions. Today I failed to live up to that responsibility. I cannot change what happened this morning, but I wanted to tell you that directly instead of pretending it never happened. Several people nearby noticed the conversation but respectfully kept their distance. The rancher looked toward the busy fairgrounds for a brief moment before answering. Sheriff, every person makes decisions they wish they could take back. What matters is what they choose after they recognize the mistake. The sheriff lowered his eyes. I should have listened before I assumed. The rancher nodded gently. Facts deserve that chance. Those 4 words carried no bitterness. They sounded like a lesson learned through experience rather than a criticism directed at one individual. The sheriff extended his hand. This time there was no audience waiting for someone to win an argument. There were only 2 men standing beside a livestock barn at the end of a long day. The rancher accepted the handshake without hesitation. It was firm, respectful, and brief. Nothing about it suggested that the morning had been forgotten, but everything about it suggested that resentment would not be allowed to define what came next. The sheriff offered a small smile. Thank you for giving this county better examples than I gave it today. The rancher answered with the same steady humility that had carried him through every difficult moment. Communities grow stronger when people are willing to learn from one another. Before either man could say anything else, several local agriculture students approached carrying notebooks. One of them looked at the sheriff and then at the rancher before asking shyly, Would both of you mind taking a picture with us? We want to remember today. The request surprised them both. The sheriff glanced toward the rancher, silently allowing him to decide. The rancher smiled warmly. Of course. They stood side by side while one of the students raised a phone to capture the moment. It was not a photograph celebrating perfection. It captured something more meaningful. It showed 2 men choosing understanding over pride. As the students thanked them and hurried away, the sheriff looked across the fairgrounds where families, ranchers, buyers, and volunteers continued working together. I think we all learned something today, he admitted. I know I did, the rancher replied. The evening judging concluded with several of the rancher's cattle receiving top honors, but by then the blue ribbons no longer seemed like the greatest victory of the day. The greater victory had been quieter. A public misunderstanding had ended with public accountability. Assumptions had given way to truth. Authority had been reminded that respect grows strongest when it begins with fairness. As the sun settled beyond the barns, livestock trailers slowly departed the fairgrounds one by one. The black rancher climbed into his pickup truck, waved to his crew, and started the long drive home with the same quiet dignity he had carried from the moment he first arrived that morning. Behind him, the sheriff remained standing near the entrance where everything had begun. This time, every rancher who passed through received the same careful greeting, the same respectful questions, and the same opportunity to be known before being judged. Sometimes the strongest lesson does not arrive through victory or defeat. Sometimes it begins the moment someone finally chooses to replace assumption with understanding, because true character is never revealed by the color of a person's skin. It is revealed by the choices they continue making long after everyone else has stopped watching.